Many of us are just one or two calamities, life events away from losing everything, including the roof over our heads. Think about it. A costly health emergency, a job layoff, or the death of a loved one, and life as we know it can just fall apart. At this very moment, 150 million people are homeless. That is 2% of the world's population. Even in the United States, the world's richest country, these are very common scenes. How did these people get here? Well, they didn't all choose to live this way. Some have mental health issues that haven't been addressed. Some have addictions that haven't been treated. Others just have bad luck. Whatever the reasons, they're human beings, and their stories should matter to us all. A new documentary, Lost in America, gives us a window into these ordinarily invisible lives.
There's a stigma that surrounds you when you're on the streets. You're not seen as a youth anymore. You're seen as a homeless youth, dirty and unwanted.
I was washing my hair in a Denny's bathroom sink, and when I flipped my hair up, I got water kind of all over the mirror, and I looked in the mirror and I saw the women behind me, and the look on their face was, they were so disgusted by me.
That was four-time Grammy-nominated, multi-platinum selling singer-songwriter Jewel. She is executive producer of that documentary. And Jewel joins me from Colorado. Jewel, so you were homeless. You've been open about that. You know what it's like to be those kids whose lives we see in the documentary. Tell us about this film and why it's important to you.
There really is a stigma about anybody that's homeless. We assume that they're lazy. I had a lot of those feelings before it happened to me. As you mentioned, it really is one tragedy. For me, it was I wouldn't have sex with a boss. He wouldn't give me my paycheck, couldn't make rent, started living in my car got stolen, and it was a poverty cycle that was almost impossible to break out of.
You also wrote a song for this documentary, and you've done us the honor of allowing us to debut it exclusively today on this show. It's called No More Tears. Here's part of it. Tell me about the song. I imagine this one is about as personal as it gets.
Working with these kids in this documentary brought back so many memories and so much gratitude for what I've been able to do and get out of in my life. Being homeless is like being an animal. You just aren't considered human anymore. I remember walking down the street and people crossing the street so that they wouldn't have to pass me. It's an incredibly dehumanizing experience, and when you start to lose that hope, you start to lose the sense of your own value. You stop thinking it's even capable for your life to be any different, which is, of course, the most dangerous thing.
As long as there's a child's laughter, as long as there's a starry sky, as long as there's a beating in my chest, there's a willingness to try.
A study was published last year that over 4.2 million kids are on the street. 700,000 of them are unaccompanied minors, so just underage children without families on the street. 40% of them are LGBTQ. Oh gosh, 30% are foster care. It's a really sad epidemic, and once you start to get to the stories of these kids and what they've faced, our compassion, our empathy really grows.
What's the biggest misconception about homelessness? If there's one thing that you would want our viewers to take away from this interview and your experience, what would it be?
I think that it's not a problem of laziness. I worked like heck to try and get off the streets, and it's just this vicious cycle that keeps dragging you in. I didn't have a mailing address, so jobs wouldn't hire me. I didn't quite look normal, so jobs wouldn't hire me. And surviving is exhausting. It's not like you're just sitting around reading a book all day. Surviving is very scary. Worrying about food and shelter is what really reduces us to being an animal. Our energy can't go into creation. I think the other thing is that every homeless person is on drugs. I was never on drugs, but I know a lot of people that have homes and jobs, and they're on drugs, and they're on Xanax, and they're taking a whiskey at night. Imagine having no infrastructure, no family, no house, no way out. The anxiety of that is absolutely paralyzing.
So look, this issue has been making headlines in California. California is one of the biggest economies in the world, but it also has a terrible, terrible track record with homelessness. More than 100,000 people are homeless across the state, which again is extremely rich. Now the governor of California has just made this a priority.
Let's call it what it is. It's a disgrace that the richest state in the richest nation, succeeding across so many sectors, is falling so far behind to properly house, heal, and humanely treat so many of its own people.
Gavin Newsom says that he wants to make a big push to fix this, that he really wants to take the bull by the horns. So he's building emergency housing trailers. He's opening up vacant state property for those who are in need. It's easy to look at this, when you're removed from this and think, okay, well, he's making a big effort. For somebody like yourself who's been there, do you really believe this? Do you buy this, and do you believe it could be a turning point?
I know there's a lot of people that want to solve it, but how we solve it is really the question. One is public support, removing the stigma, which is something I hope this documentary will do to build some empathy for the stories of these people, how we end up here. And the other is thinking of really practical solutions. What do these people really need, not what we think they need? For me, what I know would have really helped me was maybe 6 months of free housing, being able to save up enough money for rent and still feed yourself and pay. Yeah, it takes that safety net, and we need to create that type of safety net to help people get back on their feet.
We are in a presidential election year in the U.S., of course, so this caught my attention. Listen to Bernie Sanders.
I believe that in a nation which has more income and wealth inequality today than any time in 100 years, when the very, very rich are getting phenomenally richer, we should not have 500,000 people sleeping out on the streets tonight.
Knowing that he could end up being the Democratic presidential candidate, what do you think?
That number is much higher than he knows. I think every human, whether we're in politics or whether we're in the private sector, have an obligation to help our fellow man. I remember Jefferson said to Adams that bureaucracies don't know how to love. And it's true. It's hard to create systems that can effectively love and care. It takes people. It takes leaders, political leaders. And if they won't care, then we can care and we can pick up that slack.
All right, listen, it's great to hear you on this issue. Also, since I've got you, this week is the 25th anniversary of your debut studio album, Pieces of You. That's when you went big. What have you got going on now?
I'm working on a new album and a new book. This song will actually be the first song for the new project, No More Tears, which you guys are debuting. And I have a new book about the mechanics of neuroscience and how we create change in our personality and ultimately our reality.
No more tears, sweetheart, no more tears. There are no more tears to cry.
Listen, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure talking to you. It was really interesting to watch that documentary. So much of these issues, so many of these people are invisible, and you're shedding a light on that. That documentary is shedding a light on that. Jewel, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.